morning, everybody. How are you all? Well, I hope you all are keeping yourselves safe and sound at home. That's a mantra, stay home and stay safe. Well, in the time of this pandemic, we all are facing a lot of problems. I know it's difficult to keep ourselves locked down and still be scared of what's going outside. Well, we have lots of questions regarding what coronavirus is and what effects can it have on people with MS, with low immune system. Well, to answer these questions, we have a very special guest who agreed to come on an exclusive live session with us here. Her name is Dr. Heather Moday. Yes, the doctor will be coming online with us now and will be asking all your questions regarding coronavirus, your immunity, and MS. But, well, why? What happens if you get MS? If you get coronavirus in MS, or how to stay away from coronavirus? Well, to give some throw light on this, I'm going to invite Dr. now. Think any more time? Well, I've sent her the invitation and we'll connect to her soon. Hey, good morning.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good. You look great.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely. I hope you hear me well.
Yeah, just let me know if there's any feedback from my headset. I can always take it off.
Okay, that's fine for now. Thank you so much.
Good. How are you doing?
Oh, we are doing good, doctor. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Sure.
And we were actually having lots of doubts and the questions with regards to coronavirus and MS. You know, it's been said that people with low immune system, they are more prone to coronavirus, people who have blood pressure and diabetes, but nobody's talking about what if you have MS. So that's where we wanted your guidance and your help. Before proceeding further, would you like to introduce yourself first to all our audience here who were like eagerly waiting to hear from you?
Sure, yeah. So I am Dr. Heather Moday. I'm a medical doctor, and I practice in Philadelphia in the United States, and I'm trained as an immunologist allergist, which was my initial specialty, but after working for several years in more of a conventional medicine space, I moved to training in functional and integrative medicine. So, you know, how I work is very different now. I don't use a lot of drugs in my practice, and I work with people mostly with nutrition and lifestyle changes, help people with things like gut and hormone balance. And a lot of my practice is a lot of clients with autoimmune issues, a range of them because of the prevalence of it. And also many people with autoimmune disease are very frustrated. They're just not getting a lot of answers through conventional medicine. So they may come to us for help just to really support that as being something they can do in addition to their care.
Yes, absolutely. We are actually finding out answers every day about what about autoimmune disease, what more, what next is always a question mark, for us. Sure. I can see we are already started getting a lot of questions. So before I proceed, I think I should start with the first question here. This is by Wrestle News, and he has written, "Hello, doctor. Thank you for this amazing session. Can you tell me how can we know if we are immune to coronavirus?"
Well, actually, the only way to know if you're immune is to get the actual antibody testing done. At this point, many people might have been exposed potentially and had maybe a very mild set of symptoms. And we're seeing that especially in the younger populations. And really, they won't know until they get the antibody test, which is different than the test to determine whether you actively are sick. The antibody test is what happens after you've had the virus and then your immune system has created antibodies against it. Now, there's some question, whether or not people can be reinfected. I don't think we know that. In most cases, like in a lot of viruses, let's just take, for example, chickenpox virus. If you got chickenpox as a child, you're usually immune to chickenpox for the rest of your life, right?
Right.
And then also in some cases, if you had a vaccine against a virus, again, something like chickenpox vaccine or measles, you will be considered to be immune most likely for the rest of your life and not get reinfected. I think right
Yes.
now they don't know enough about coronavirus,
Yeah.
the SARS-2 coronavirus, to say whether or not it's protected, but the assumption would be that yes, you would be protected. So.
Okay. But doctor, like one of my followers here, she got tested for coronavirus, and she said that the tests are going negative. First test, second test, they are going negative. Although the symptoms are the same. That's where
Mhm.
why people are getting more scared. That
Right.
they have
Mm-hmm.
illness, so they get confused whether it's a relapse or is it actually
Mm.
coronavirus. What is it? That's where
Right.
confusion comes
Yeah.
in.
Yeah. So you're talking about like the acute testing to see if you actually have it. So like
Yeah.
the nasal swabs and the throat
Yes.
swabs. And,
Exactly.
I think in the beginning they were not great. There wasn't a lot of consistency in terms of picking up the virus. I think that they've gotten better.
Yeah.
And so certainly, and that there's probably certain stages when people first have symptoms that maybe they're coming back negative. So it is a good thing to retest if people can do that, because the biggest thing right now is for people who are infected, even if it's very mild, to make sure that they're social distancing and that they're quarantining, because then you can pass it on to someone who's more susceptible, someone who's immune suppressed, or someone who's elderly. So that's the
Yeah.
whole idea, really, is to try to keep that spread, right? To keep the virus, because we don't have a vaccine.
Right.
There's still that's a lot we don't really know about this virus in terms of
Absolutely.
how it's
Something surprised
transmitted. It
every
seems to
day.
Right. It changes all the time. And so that's the one thing that we can do is that distancing. So
Yeah. So we
until we
have
have
another
better answers.
yeah. We have another comment by Tag 18, and she's saying that to see you have a doctor with a more holistic approach to self-care
Yes.
with autoimmune disease, which is
Yeah.
actually very rare. So I'll tell you, Tag 18 herself, she's not taking any kind of DMTs, and she's
Right.
handling her MS with lots of nutritions and
Great.
all that. So that's why she's a very strong person. So she's very happy to see you here.
Yeah, and I think that's wonderful. I think, it's a really personal decision, and it's really dependent on how symptomatic you are. And as MS you know, it's sort of, I want to say it's typical of autoimmune disease, but it actually has a lot of different presentations, as everyone knows, right? I mean, people can have ocular presentation, they can have motor presentation, sensory, it can be relapsing and remitting, it can be progressive. And, for someone, if you are at the point that you're trying to prevent further tissue damage, there's nothing wrong with taking a disease modifying drug, even if it's for a period of time while you're maybe making other changes in your lifestyle and your habits and your diet. And that's when it's good to work with a practitioner who can help you do that. But I also have clients that they come in and they have mild symptoms. They've decided they don't want to do any DMTs. They want to just work on modulating diet and working on sleep and stress and infection and things like that. And and a lot of them do very well. So I think it's really a personal decision, and what people feel comfortable with, and also how far along the disease process is. So.
Yes, absolutely. So many people are just going without DMTs nowadays. It's a shift towards
Yeah,
non-DMT.
and I mean, I think, there's a lot of side effects, which are difficult. And, it's not like we know a lot about these drugs either, right? There's so many of them,
Yes,
and a lot of them are, on the market only for, a year or so. We don't know all the, the outcomes. And, so that's cause for concern. But it is a possibility that you can take something for a while and then get off of it if you feel that you're able to do that. And that happens all the time, right? So.
right. Okay, we have another question by MS underscore Jellylegs. She has written, do you have a view on the importance of vitamin D in
Mm-hmm.
connection with protection against COVID-19? There
Yeah.
is a lot of debate around this at the moment in the media.
So I'm a big proponent of vitamin D for really everybody. it's been associated, what also has a very strong association with MS, either both in the potential risk of developing MS, so where you grew up and whether or not you moved as a child to a place that was a high latitude area. It's associated often with lower vitamin D levels. And there have been some studies showing improvement with vitamin D, with taking vitamin D. And then the other thing about vitamin D is that just for the average person who doesn't have an autoimmune issue, it's extremely important in both anti-inflammation, right? Calming inflammation throughout the body when we have excess inflammation, but it also seems to modulate certain immune cells that help us fight infection. So it's really this really interesting, it's technically not a vitamin, they call it a vitamin, but it's really a hormone because we make it in our body from sunlight, right? From ultraviolet radiation hits our skin. It creates a whole very complicated chemical process in our cells and creates this vitamin D, which then can go inside of our cells and actually, sort of change how proteins are made and everything. So it's really quite fascinating. I don't think there's any downside to taking vitamin D at all. I mean, you certainly don't need to take massive quantities, but it's a cheap and easy blood test to get to sort of see where you are. Every lab runs it, and it's very easy to find good quality vitamin D supplementation, especially if you are not a person who can get outside in the sun. And most of us can't. I mean, I live on the East Coast of the United States. We're starting to get some sun now, but, for 5 months, there's not a lot,
Yeah.
So, and it is sometimes hard to get in food too. It's not in a lot of foods. Usually when it's in foods, it's because it's been actually added in. And that's why, when people always talk about dairy products as being good for vitamin D, it's not that it has natural vitamin D in milk, it's that it's added in the processing of milk. Yeah.
Yes. But does that vitamin D, protect you against COVID-19? Like people are saying that vitamin C protects you against COVID-19. What are your takes on this?
So it doesn't protect specifically against any virus. I mean, like specifically, but both vitamin C and vitamin D are very protective in regards to, well, vitamin C is a really, really important, what's called an antioxidant. And antioxidants basically are, they're substances usually that we get from food that they basically scavenge free radicals. And free radicals they're damaging molecules that are made when we're exposed to everything from pesticides to pollution, even the food we eat. Again, sunlight, right? That's radiation. We also create free radicals all the time in our own bodies because it's part of the process in which our cells make energy. So sort of like, I always say it's sort of like building a fire, right? You have to build a fire to make energy, to make heat and fuel. But as part of that, you also get smoke and soot and all this, bad stuff, right? So those sort of free radicals can go around and they can damage our cells. They can actually damage our tissues. So antioxidants actually neutralize them. And vitamin C is a perfect example of a really good antioxidant. So, and the reason why that's really good for your immune system is if you think about it, if our cells are getting damaged all the time, right, that actually activates our immune system to be sort of on overload and become super inflamed. And when we're in an inflamed state all the time, we really can't do a good job of getting rid of the bad stuff, right? Really be active against, say, like viruses and bacteria and things that really are going to hurt us. And so, so vitamin C is super important for that, and vitamin D in particular as well. So I think it's good to take both, and it's, you can also get vitamin C from foods. I mean, that's, read, different kinds of vegetables and fruits, like citrus fruits and things.
When there was this outbreak of coronavirus, everybody was running to buy oranges and lemons and vitamins and capsules, and everything went just out of stock. So
I know.
For vitamin C everywhere.
Yeah, and the nice thing is that vitamin C is found in a lot of fruits and vegetables. It's found in strawberries. It's found in red peppers. But, vitamin C is used up, and the more sort of inflamed we are or toxic, we just go through it, right? So it has to be like readily repleted on a daily basis. And that's why one of the reasons why we do recommend, like, for example, at a time like this, or, during normal flu and cold virus season, that you actually take some supplemental vitamin C. It's not harmful. You'll excrete any bit that you don't use, so it's not toxic in any way. So it's fine to do.
So what is the amount of vitamin C that a person should take, every day? Because everything,
Right.
has a limit to it.
Exactly. And it varies. I would say that if you want to sort of be just on, if you want to have a normal general amount of vitamin C in your body, is if you take something like 500 milligrams 2 to 3 times a day. And the reason why I say that you should space it out is that our intestinal tract can only absorb a certain amount of vitamin C at one time. And in fact, if you take a massive quantity of vitamin C, let's say you take 5,000 milligrams, it could actually give you some diarrhea. So not a great side effect, not dangerous, but not very comfortable. So I usually recommend about 500 milligrams 3 times a day. You'll read studies that people have done so much more. But I think that's a sort of a good place to start. And then, of course, just make sure you're getting through your food.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to the next question. QU33 Com3 has written, are there concerns with still doing infusions such as Tisbury? It might be coming from that, people are scared of taking their DMTs during the time of coronavirus.
Yeah. No, and I can understand that because, depending on the drug that you're taking, you can be lowering some of the sort of inflammatory cytokines that are involved in the pathology of MS, right? So in MS, there's invasion with the T cell lymphocytes, and there's increases in certain kinds of interferons and tumor necrosis factor, et cetera. So it's an interesting balancing act because we do need those cytokines in order to have a rapid, like a good immune response against viruses and bacteria. And so people with MS might consider to be, depending on the drug that they're taking now, to be slightly sort of immune suppressed for that immediate response, right? However, in the late stages of coronavirus, when people have had massive infection in their lungs, we actually get an outpouring or an increase in some of those cytokines and what are called interleukins, all these other chemical mediators, because they're trying to put out so much, they're trying to kill so many virally infected cells that we get overwhelmed. And that's what when they talk about that cytokine storm, that's happening. This is in late stage people. This is not in the average person who's having coronavirus, but those people that are hospitalized on ventilators, they have massive involvement in their lungs and other organs. Part of it is because the body has, in an attempt to kill so many virally infected cells, have put out all these cytokines, and those cytokines themselves, they're just destroying even more cells. So it's almost like this overload. So in a way, certain of the DMTs, in fact, they were using one that was used for rheumatoid arthritis. I think it's called Cora, to try and actually slow down the release of cytokines, or some of them. So it's this real balancing act with immunity, right? Like, you want to have a really strong immune response, but you don't want it to go too crazy. And with coronavirus, we're seeing that in just a select few people who have the worst outcomes, that they're having this very extreme reaction. But I would say that's not normal. I mean, that's not like typical of most people. Now, to answer the question, I would say that, you want to look at what you're taking, and I would just say, do as much as you can precautionarily to stay away from people who might potentially be infected, because the biggest thing is that you just don't want to have to deal with the infection, right? You shouldn't put yourself at risk if you're on any sort of medication that can potentially make you a little bit immune deficient. So.
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
and moving on to next question, we have a question from Wrestle News again, who's written, "Can someone be severely infected and not have a fever with coronavirus?"
Good question. You know, it's a potential, but I would say it's not typical. So one of the, you know, fever is one of our sort of normal responses to any sort of infection. It's mediated by the vagus nerve. It goes up, you know, it tells a part of the brain, the hypothalamus, to increase our basal temperature. And when we increase basal temperature, it's in an effort to also kill things, right? So many organisms don't do well at, you know, when our body temperature is high. And so fever is really a protective response for our immune system. It's what we do to help kill. That being said, yeah, some people don't really spike high fevers. It doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have the infection. You know, that's the weird thing about this virus, is that the typical things are cough, fever, and shortness of breath. But there are people who develop, you know, sore throat, which is a little bit more unusual. Some people lost their sense of smell and taste. And those may have been, you know, mild and then they went away. So they may never have a fever, or they may never check their temperature because then maybe the fever is very low grade. So it's a possibility to still be infected. Yeah.
Okay. Moving on to next question by Warrior Spirits. I think it's a repetition, but still, I'll just read it out. He's written, "Are multiple sclerosis patients at a greater risk?"
Well, I think they're only really at a greater risk. Right. They're only, I think, at a greater risk for the most part because of medications that they're taking. I wouldn't say that they are necessarily at a risk otherwise, you know, in terms of being immune deficient, unless they have some other reason that their immune system is weak. Because just because you have an autoimmune process going on, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't fight infection against viruses or bacteria. But if you're taking medication regulating your normal immune response in an effort to keep down the autoimmune activity, you know, the corollary is that you could be developing, you could have a problem fighting certain infections, and that would be the only thing. And prednisone as well. So some people who might take steroids, which is not as typical in MS as it is in maybe some other autoimmune diseases, but that is also something that will make you immune suppressed. So.
We have the question by MS_Jellylegs again. She's written, "Do you have a view on whether MSers should exclude or include dairy or gluten in their food programs? I know there are lots of views
you know,
on
I
gut
think,
health."
Yeah, so there's lots of views on food, you know, interventions for MS. And I truly believe that there's no one absolute way to go. There are, you know, we do know that the microbiota of the gut, or the normal bacteria that reside in the gut, play a huge, they play a big part in general, but definitely all different kinds. And in particular in MS, it seems to be there's certain bacteria present that might cause what's called a molecular mimicry, or like a confusion, right, between the self tissue and the bacteria. Other viruses might be involved too, like Epstein-Barr virus. And so there is that potential for things that occur in the gut that might, and you know, start giving us some autoimmune reactivity. When it comes to foods, now gluten is an interesting protein because it can cause, in some people that are susceptible, issues with permeability of the gut. So, and dairy similarly can do that, but also dairy has been implicated in things like diabetes type 1 in children, the cross-reactivity between the cells in the pancreas that produce insulin and certain proteins in dairy. So I'm not a big fan of dairy in general for people with autoimmune disease. I don't think it's I don't think it's necessary. And I do think that there's enough data to show that it might potentially be a problem. And similarly to gluten. Now, that being said, I don't say that really for any other food. I know a lot of people take out all different grains and all different things like that. I think that those are the types of things that you should work with a nutritionist on. I see is that a lot of people come in on very restrictive diets because they've taken out so many things. And that I think is actually in the end much more dangerous, especially because they've taken out lots of nutrients, they've taken out minerals, they've taken out tons of fiber because they've removed different, plant fibers from their diet. And in the end, they end up hurting themselves because their gut microbiota really starts to decline because your gut needs fiber. And it also needs variety. We need variety from our foods. Like we need to eat from the rainbow. We need all sorts of nutrients. And I think when we get into these very restrictive diets, it puts us at danger. So I always say you can do a trial off dairy. You can do a trial off gluten. You can sort of see what your disease does. You can work with a nutritionist. You can get some testing done. And I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, so like they say that MS, behaves differently on different people. I think diet also does the same. For
Yeah.
some people,
Mm-hmm.
diet, the dairy products are good. For some people, it's not good. So, for example, when I got MS, 7 years back, I tried everything. I tried gluten-free, I tried dairy, I tried legumes,
Yeah.
and all I could find that everything suits, but legumes give me fatigue somehow.
Yeah.
I don't know how it works, but it does. When I eat lots of legumes and beans and all, I feel a little fatigued out. So it does
Yeah.
depend from person to person. Yeah. We have
And
another
I think that's
question from,
important to know. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, we have another question from Warrior Spirits, and he's again written, is dry throat a symptom of virus?
A dry throat or a sore throat? I
Dry
would say,
throat is
I would
what
say
they say. Maybe you can
not
explain the difference.
necessarily. Yeah. I mean, I think if you have dry throat, that can come from lots of different things, right? If you're not well hydrated, or certain medications can decrease saliva production, and then sore throat's different. I mean, that's actual pain, right? Irritation, like when you have a flu or strep throat or something very different. And that for sure, that pharyngitis can become from any virus. It doesn't have to be coronavirus. I mean, the cold can give it to you, because the entryway for most respiratory viruses are through the nose and the mouth. And so that's usually where it starts first, right? Before it even goes down into the lungs.
Right. We have another question by Saras.Survanshi, and he's written, does alcohol reduce immunity?
Good question. Yes, I actually did a whole video of this on my, if you go to my Instagram, on my IGTV page, I did a whole video on alcohol, and yes, it definitely does. So for a couple different reasons, alcohol is an irritant to the gut lining, and so it can really increase gut permeability, which of course we don't need, especially if you have MS or any autoimmune disease. You don't want gut permeability at all. We know it also decreases the activity of certain white blood cells like natural killer cells, which are extremely important for viral activity, and also T cells, which are a type of. The other thing is that it's a toxin, right? So, when it breaks down in the body, alcohol creates these very reactive toxins that our liver has to clear. And when our liver is busy clearing, toxins from alcohol, it can't clear well toxins from other things that we're eating, because we're all exposed to toxins every day. The more toxic we are, the more inflamed we become, the more our immune system has to be a little bit on like a heightened response. And then lastly, one of the big things is that alcohol interferes with sleep. And when we don't have good sleep, our immune system does not work very well, because a lot of the work that our immune system does, it does at night. When we're in a deep sleep phase, that's when we actually kill a lot of viruses and bacteria. And so alcohol disrupts our sleep tremendously. And so that's another reason why during this time, I would recommend people drink very little or not at all. It really doesn't give you any benefit, basically.
Absolutely, it's on your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have the other question by Nicole Con, And he's written, does the virus trigger MS symptoms or a relapse?
I don't think that there's any proof of that at all. I haven't seen any studies. I haven't, seen any cases of people with MS developing coronavirus and then seeing a flare-up. I will tell you what could, and that is increased stress around the virus. Because we know that, our normal natural stress response to worry and being socially isolated and just being scared increases our secretion of adrenaline and cortisol, and that has been known to chronically, so like let's just say over a couple of weeks or months, to cause problems with our immune system. So it can also decrease activity of certain immune cells, and it also can lower a very important antibody in our gut called IgA, which is part of our initial sort of innate response to keep out all sorts of pathogens, not just viruses, but bacteria too. So we know that cortisol can do that. And so I would say that, that would be the biggest risk. I wouldn't say that, that as far as I know, that, you're at higher risk of getting it, again, because we don't know who's taking immunosuppressive drugs or not.
Yeah. Um, the other thing is that, during this lockdown, when everybody's inside the home, everybody's
Yeah.
feeling anxious. Lots of people are having their anxiety attack and all. You can
Sure.
get confused with many things. Is there something that you
Absolutely.
can suggest, doctor, for people, who gets that anxiety, seeing the
Mm-hmm.
news, reading what's going
Yeah, don't
on?
watch the news. So interesting. Anxiety is really like a collective response. Most of the time, we're responding to things that are outside of us, and right now, when we are inside, we're watching TV, we're scrolling through, websites, and we have to also understand that a lot of what we're reading is it's meant to be sensationalist. It's meant to grab our attention. So even the language that's used is very, I think, sensationalist. It's very damaging. It's very traumatic. It's not really just telling you facts in a very straight, sober way. They're really trying to get
Dramatic.
you, drawn into it. And you can feel it. The more the more you're scrolling and the more you're reading, and you just start feeling like that anxiety sort of lifting in your chest. And so I'm a big proponent of not really reading the news. I mean, you want to be informed, but I would say, check in once a day, find out what's going on, maybe try a really neutral web or news channel, a channel that's not really skewed either, to the right or to the left. It's just very neutral reporting. I also think reading print instead of listening, because, when you're listening to it, they're trying to make it more dramatic and they're showing you graphics. And so news is very provoking, and I don't really think it does anything for us on a health basis. So that's number one. And then number two is make sure you're really doing a lot of self-care. I mean, do a lot of breath work things, things that can actually engage what's called your parasympathetic nervous system, which is, it's a part of the nervous system that's very calming. It's what helps us digest and sleep. It's what lowers our heart rate. And so, breath work, the type of breath work that you'd find in a yogic practice,
Right.
really, really important. And then just doing self-care, taking a bath, doing reading instead of watching TV, going for long walks. Right now we don't need more anxiety and stress in our lives. And so we shouldn't really invite it in,
Absolutely. I've been having friends, they just call me every time they read a new symptom about coronavirus, they feel it's happening to them every
Right.
day. So that's a very hilarious
Yes.
response to
It's a
that.
good thing to I don't watch any news TV at all. Absolutely zero. Because quite
Exactly.
honestly, it's not balanced news. I mean, regardless of where you sit on the spectrum of what you believe, it's really hard to find neutral news reporting. So I choose to just get it from print or, you know, different places that I feel like I can read it and decide myself, you know, like what I want to get out of that versus someone like acting out on screen. You know, it's not good for us.
Doctor, coming to the self-care, apart from vitamin C, it's being said that people who are taking a lot of turmeric and ginger, those
Hmm.
kinds of things really strengthen your immunity, and you don't get coronavirus. That's what people are talking about. What do you think about such statements?
Well, I would say, I mean, I love turmeric in general, but I wouldn't say it's the best thing for people to be taking in large doses for coronavirus because it's so anti-inflammatory, right? So that it might, if you were taking really large doses on a daily basis, let's say for arthritis or something, it might potentially decrease that initial inflammatory response that we need. Okay. So I wouldn't say that's one I would necessarily increase at this time. I'm a big fan, like I said, of the antioxidants like vitamin C, vitamin A, vitamin E. And you can, of course, get those through foods. You don't have to supplement with them. Zinc is another one, which is it's used in lots of aspects of the immune system. So it doesn't downregulate the immune system. It doesn't necessarily upregulate it. It's very modulating.
Right.
And then there's a couple of, sort of medicinal herbs and mushrooms that might be good for improving like natural killer cell activity, specifically against viruses. So,
Yeah.
there are some things out there, but I would say if you can just make sure you're getting a really good diet and that you're sleeping really well and doing some exercise and self-care and stress management, you're doing a great job, you know.
I hear you talking about sleep so frequently. So what do you think? How much on an average a person should sleep on a daily basis, with or without MS, fighting coronavirus? How much on an average
Right.
people should sleep?
Yeah, and so there's some more recent studies over the past few years that have looked. I mean, there's a slight variation, obviously, especially in age groups. Um, but I would say that generally somewhere between 7 and 8.5 hours of sleep on a nightly basis is sort of the sweet spot, right? Um, and I mean, people also know, like when they wake up, do you feel refreshed? Do you feel awake and alert? Do you feel that you make it through the day with your energy being pretty good? Um, and if that's the case, then you know you've gotten restorative sleep. But I would say yes, it's probably about 7.5 to 8.5 hours of sleep. Obviously, some age groups need more. Teenagers sleep different patterns. They tend to sleep later in the morning and stay up later at night. That's just part of their development. Um, as we get older, we often have more fragmented sleep, and that's actually considered to be normal. So it's not unusual that people in their 70s might get up really early in the morning, might take a nap in the afternoon. I think the idea is to cumulatively get around 8 hours a day. And as long as you feel good and restored, then that's a good sign.
Okay. We have another comment from Scorpio Oct 225. She has written, my neuro strongly suggested I get my Ocrevus infusion. I got it
Mm-hmm.
last month and I have hunkered down ever since.
Yes. Well, I mean, we've all had to hunker down. So, but I think that, with Ocrevus, it is going to, you want to be a little bit more careful being exposed to people. Like you certainly, if you say we're like a healthcare worker, right, in a hospital, that would put you at greater risk just because of your exposure. Like you're just much more highly exposed if you say work in a delivery service for a grocery store or Amazon or something like that, or if you're working in any sort of healthcare setting that you're exposed to potentially sick people. So those would be like high risk things, right, to do. But I think that if you're just at home like everybody else, it's okay. I mean, you'll be fine, right? Just take care of
Okay.
yourself.
Okay, we have another comment from 1965 Mercedes. He has written, in January, went for a relapsing to progressive. My walking has deteriorated. My consultant put me on antidepressants, sleep, but muscles not loosened. Any recommendations?
Um, in terms of for walking, is that the
Yes,
question? Okay.
yes, that's like
Mm-hmm. It's hard to know because I don't know specifically about, your case. And it depends. I would say first is, to look at your diet and see if there's anything that potentially could be causing worsening in your symptoms. You have to make sure that everything else is good. There's no major toxicities in your environment that you are exposed to, that you're sleeping well. I think also doing PT or physical therapy, having that sort of like movement, trying to do some exercise, like one of the things that does really help, I think, in cases of MS is having movement, whether it's with a physical therapist, occupational therapist, or you're doing it on your own.
right.
Super helpful. Um, there's some data studies that have shown that using CBD or cannabinoid related, either full spectrum, hemp, which has other things besides CBD, but might help with, well, certainly can help with pain, maybe spasticity,
Yes.
and maybe some motor activity. So, at least in animal studies, there were some that showed it was really good for some motor activity. So, sort of using that power of the endocannabinoid system in the body, that might be something that's useful too. And again, that's sort of trial and error. You have to try it and then increase the dosage and see what works best. For some people, it works great. For others, maybe not so much. But I think it's certainly worth looking into because in terms of toxicity levels, it's really a safe thing.
Right. Another question from Saras.Thurvanshi. He has written, MS patients suffer numbness, tingling, eye blindness, fatigue, and all. So, can these be reduced by improving immunity?
Well, yes, because the whole idea of when you say improving immunity, we're trying to decrease the amount of autoimmunity, right? So, in autoimmune disease, what's happening, or especially in MS, is there are antibodies that are attacking self proteins, in particular the myelin basic protein that's in the myelin covering the nerve sheaths in the body. Um, so, in order to improve that, right, is to have less activity of those self antibodies, the ones that go against the self proteins. And I would say that, if you want to call that improving immunity, it would be really sort of decreasing that overreactivity or misdirection. And, things like taking away things that might be provoking it. For example, looking to see if there's any abnormality in the gut bacteria, making sure that people have really healthy gut barriers, looking at presence of other viruses like Epstein-Barr virus or herpes viruses, which have been implicated in MS. Making sure that there's no foods that could be exacerbating the symptom. So those are the types of things. I think it's really more like unloading or taking a load off of the immune system so that it can do its job better and that it's less likely to be, providing more of this autoimmune reactivity.
Okay. So we have a comment from Scorpioct25. She has written, I am allergic to dairy, most tree nuts, peanuts, eggs, soya, shellfish, and seafood. And
Mm.
she has also said that she keeps the television off because she knows the news is so negative and it
Mm-hmm.
was affecting her kids emotionally. Um,
Yeah.
another the comment from 1965 that we answered about regarding the leg problem, the muscle relaxant. So he's saying that he's on antidepressants prescribed by consultant to help relax.
Mm.
He's
Yeah, I don't think antidepressants really help MS in any way. I mean, certainly if people feel that the antidepressants are going to help with mood, some people do. A lot of it's questionable about how much of it is a placebo effect. But I think that certainly if you have a depressed mood and it's really impacting your life, and taking, say, an SSRI is helpful to you and gives you a better outlook and more energy, there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that that's a very personal decision. It's not going to worsen MS in any way. Do I think it's the answer? No, I don't think it's the answer, but it certainly could be a bridge to maybe working on some other issues, because being diagnosed with MS can be upsetting. It can be, make you worry. And so I think there's other ways to work with, like a therapist, someone to talk to, like a coach around having the disease. And then over time, maybe then, the antidepressant won't be needed.
Right. The other question that we've got from Scorpio25, and she has written, what do you think of cannabinoids and cognitive dysfunction?
Yeah, and so I was just talking about the cannabinoids. I think that there seems to be, at least early on, some interesting, promising data about using cannabinoids, not just CBD, but some of the other cannabinoids and THC even, to improve certain aspects of cognitive function, pain, spasticity, sleep, mood even. So I do think I think it's a really interesting area of research, and I think it's something that people should try, because it certainly is not going to impair health in another way that really doesn't interact with a lot of medications. And I think it's worthwhile trying, as long as you get good sources, right? You have to have good, organic, well screened. I wouldn't just buy something, at the corner store,
Okay. With another question from Body Spirits, and he has written, sometimes I feel sharp pain in my chest and back when I take very deep breath. Should I be concerned?
It depends, right? I mean, it depends on how long it's been going on for. You certainly, I would say, if it's something new, you should contact your doctor about it, because I wouldn't say that's normal. It doesn't mean that, you have pneumonia or anything, or an infection. It could be something else. But if it's going on for a while, see them, have them do a physical exam and an x-ray to rule things out. But I wouldn't worrying about something that you don't know exists. It doesn't make the situation worse. It actually, doesn't make it better. It actually makes it worse, because it, again, makes us more stressed. So
I think a person can try more of yoga or something, just to relax himself. I think, all the questions that we've got from Body Spirits is more about coronavirus. Maybe it's the anxiety the person is feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. So another question from Scorpio25, and she's written, have you heard about the medical medium? And if you have, what is
Yes.
your professional opinion?
My professional opinion is that none of it's based in fact. So I know that he's very popular. He feels that he has gotten his information from a higher power. So I think that if you believe that and you want to follow it, that's fine. But there's no proof at all, scientifically or anything, that what he's saying is true. Now, that being said, he says a lot of things that he also says things that are already backed up by science, right? When he talks a lot about nutrition. So I'm not saying everything that he says is wrong. But, for example, the whole idea about drinking celery juice every day. Celery's it's a nutritious vegetable. It has a lot of great, components to it, but there's no proof on the planet that if you drink it every day, it's going to save your life. So, I think I think he has a little bit of like that status of being very popular, and a lot of people follow him. because they want to believe that, he has this special power. And I can't really, I can't associate with that, because what I do is very much based in science and also on individual needs, right? Like, I never say, for the most part, with few exception, that there's one thing, like one diet, that is good for everybody. Like, we know there's certain things that are good for everybody, but I'm never going to say that, nobody can eat like legumes, or nobody should eat corn, or nobody should eat this. They're just vegetables and fruits and grains. We all have our individual intolerances and needs. And, I don't, the idea of sort of demonizing food, I think, is really dangerous,
Right. So just to say that we have already crossed 40 minutes and we have been talking since then. If you guys have any more questions, you can just write down here. After 10 minutes, probably we'll have to hang up, because Instagram has a rule of 1 hour anyways.
Yeah.
And we 1 hour of valuable time of the doctor. So,
Yeah.
Doctor, another question that I have, that, since it's lockdown and everybody's staying in their houses nowadays, people are getting bored, people are getting annoyed, frustrated, because of which a lot of people are coming up with problems of headaches and migraines and all, So what do you think? Is it more of the, something in their mind that they are feeling headache, or they're actually feeling that pain, and what should they do, to help them?
It might be a part of it could be inactivity, quite honestly, because most people, even if they're not exercising avidly, but most of us, even just in our day-to-day walking around, running errands, walking to work or whatever, getting on the train, we're getting 10,000 steps or more a day, maybe 15,000, depending on where you work, where you live. And now we're inside all the time and sitting. And that is, it's very bad for blood circulation and oxygenation. So I'm a big advocate of doing, even if you're not a big exerciser, that you should just go out and walk for an hour. Because when we have more oxygenation to our brain, which of course comes from, blood, right? Blood circulating, our muscles pumping, we're going to have less headaches. We're going to sleep better. And when we exercise and walk, we release endorphins. And endorphins are, the sort of feel good, pleasurable, molecules. So I think it's really, really, really important to do whatever exercise you can, or you can stay at home. You can do some yoga. I mean, yoga is really great for, again, especially if you add in some breathing with that, some diaphragmatic or belly breathing. That's going to bring a lot of oxygen into your bloodstream, which is going to help for headaches. So I think that's a large part of it, is activity and exercise and getting outside. And, and there's a psychological advantage too. There's this whole idea in certain countries like Japan, that you do something called forest bathing, which basically means being out in nature, that you go out in like the woods or a forest. And that's very healing. And so even if there's just a park near your house, like going out and like smelling the roses and looking at the trees, and I think that's really important, because staying inside all day is not healthy. So as much as you can without, and still being safe,
Yeah, I know. So the place where I belong to, it's India. We have cramped houses here. We don't even have places to move around, and now everything is just sealed. So you're not even allowed to get out of your houses.
Oh,
So
wow.
in that condition, people are supposed to stay within the 4 walls only. So that's strict here now.
It is tough. Yeah, I would say, in that case, try to open up the windows if you can, at least, and then do some form of exercise in your house. Like I said, even if it's, yoga, dancing, calisthenics, anything like that is going to help for sure.
Yes. Doctor, one question I have, which is about heat intolerance. So in this, people do, have lots of problems of heat intolerance, and now that the summer is approaching, do you have any kind of suggestions for this that one should follow?
Yeah, it's a tricky symptom, because they're not 100% sure why it occurs. It can occur in other autoimmune diseases too. There's obviously some dysregulation of the sort of the, we have in the hypothalamus an area that regulates our body temperature. And then, of course, if it's hot outside, it's going to be harder to cool off. Yeah, I would say it's really tough. I mean, the best thing is, as much as possible, if you are, depending on where you live, like if you have fans, obviously you want to try to use those as much as possible. If you have air conditioning, even greater. Trying to stay, like, wear light colored clothing when you're outside. You can use a lot of cold cloths or ice, to put on like your neck or areas where you're getting like over the pulse points, like your wrists and your neck.
Right.
Putting your feet in like a cold bath. Anything to help cool down that feeling, right? That's probably the best I can say. It's a tough thing, I know. It's just it's an odd symptom and side effect of the disease.
Personally, what I feel that, when I have lots of heat problem, I start having bladder problems. I start having headache, and my fatigue increases. So I know, oh God, I don't have to stand here. I have to go in the shelter and put on the AC. Heat is definitely something which many people are facing. Like, some people have heat intolerance, and while others have cold intolerance. Of course.
Yeah, right. And it has to do with that inner, sort of thermostat that we have that regulates our body temperature, and that's all part of the autonomic nervous system, and that explains having like the bladder issues sometimes that get worse. That makes sense. That might get worse.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
we'll just take the last question here by Scorpio 25 again. Thanks for being with us, Scorpio. Yeah, she has written that, Dr. Moday, what is your professional opinion about blood test diet and MS?
So I do know about the blood test diet. You mean like the type A, B, O? That was developed by Dr. D'Adamo, who's a naturopathic physician. I'm aware of it. I think that it's, again, never been proven in any like large controlled trials to really pan out. Again, it's, I think one blood type, they eat more meat, and the other blood type eats more grains and things like that. And I think it has to do with the lectins on those are the proteins that are on certain foods, and how they might interact with the proteins that are on certain blood types. So I can tell you that I've heard of it. I know some people benefit from it, but there's not any large studies that have shown that it helps. It's certainly not harmful to try for 2 to 3 months. Because they do, it's somewhat restrictive, but it does include all of the plans, I think, include a lot of different sources of vitamins and minerals and macronutrients. And so I think it's really trying it out. And if you feel like it helps, great. If not, then, but there's no data on it, unfortunately.
Okay, so W. Calmi has written, I think we've already spoken about this, but still I'll just go through it. He's written, what are your recommendations for the best ways through diet, supplement, etc. to remain safe and healthy during pandemic, when you have MS?
Yeah. So like I said, that, nutrition wise is try to get as varied amount of fruits and vegetables as you can. And if you're not intolerant to grains, do grains as well. You want to get a lot of antioxidants like vitamin C and vitamin D. There's also something called glutathione, which can be really helpful too, which I also did a video on that on my Instagram TV, that if you want to watch that, that's been shown to be helpful, that you can find some places too. Other things would be like, there's some herbal supplements like astragalus, which is a Chinese herb, and also reishi mushroom, which is a Asian mushroom that's found in supplement form. Both of those could be really helpful for fighting viral infections. So.
Okay, yeah. Doctor, thank you so much. It's been an hour.
You're welcome. Thanks. Yes, it was a pleasure.
It was a great insight, and everybody is just writing praises and thanking you all the while.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Everyone be safe and healthy.
Yes, we'll be safe and healthy, and same to you. You be safe. Okay. You are the hero. You are the doctor for us.
Yeah.
Okay, doctor.
All right. It's a pleasure. Take care. Bye now.
Okay. Bye. Thank you.